Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. It is our great honor to welcome so many music professionals and decision makers from around the world joining today's edition of Resetting the Stage. Resetting the Stage is a global online conference series exploring dynamic challenges and opportunities faced by arts sector professionals. Each conversation convenes a diverse group of industry experts, including public officials, managers, presenters, board members, and other decision makers who navigate complex questions and examine the evolving landscape of the future of performance. Season 2 widens the conversation, encourages greater participation, and extends the reach to include the voice of more communities around the world, including the addition of simulcast audio translation of all sessions to English and Spanish, and a special add-on entitled Resetting the Stage Enfoque Colombia, that, following each global discussion, allows experts from Colombia and across Latin America to adapt ideas raised to the region's unique realities. We are thrilled to have you join us today by participating, exchanging, and discussing in these interactive cross-sector and cross-continental conversations to make sense of a performing arts world in transformation. The Global Leaders Program offers an Ivy League curated executive graduate certificate in social entrepreneurship and cultural agency. Each year, 60 music professionals distinguished by proven accomplishments and a persevering commitment to create change, become part of an international cohort. Led in partnership with 9 top universities, among them Harvard, Duke, Georgetown, NYU, and McGill, the Global Leaders Program's faculty includes Nobel Prize recipients, Grammy winners, and TED presenters. The Spanish Association of Symphony Orchestras, AEOS, is a non-profit association which brings together 35 symphony orchestras from Spain and Portugal. The Spanish Association of Symphony Orchestras has the aim of promoting and developing a range of initiatives to encourage cooperation of its member orchestras, in addition to providing a place where people can meet, exchange information, and train. Classical Next is the global gathering for all art music professionals. Representatives from all sectors are offered a place to meet and connect, do business, brainstorm, create, and be inspired. Artists, managers, presenters, orchestras, labels, educators, members of the press, and more come together each year at the annual event, as well as online throughout the year. Through its international network of professionals, Classical Next helps the global scene collectively optimize what the art music form is and can be. In addition to designing and implementing Colombia's monetary policy, Banco de la República, Colombia's central bank, runs a 29-city countrywide network of cultural centers, libraries, and archaeological and art museums. The bank hosts Colombia's preeminent annual chamber music season. Its main recital hall is located in Bogotá and is well known for its award-winning architecture, impressive acoustics, and enthusiastic audiences. Before introducing today's distinguished speakers, I would like to share brief housekeeping requests to help make today's session more interactive and engaging for all of you. At the bottom of the screen, you will see a control panel with the chat. Please go over now and write your name, country of residence, and your organization. In the control panel, you will also find a Q&A button. You are encouraged to engage directly with our panelists by posing a question for them in this Q&A box. Please submit your questions as early as possible, as there will be a limit to how many can be answered during this session. Real-time interpretation of our sessions is provided. You can choose your preferred language in the interpretation section of your control panel. Today's global session will be followed by a second panel discussion focused on adapting today's themes to the context of the arts sector in the Ibero-Americas. This Spanish session will begin 15 minutes after the conclusion of today's global session and will last for 45 minutes. We encourage those of you interested in the region to stay for the break and join this special Latin America-themed debrief conversation co-presented in alliance with our partner, Fundación Bolívar da Vivienda. Finally, at the close of today's global session, you'll be prompted to complete a brief survey that will appear on your screens. We kindly ask you that you share constructive feedback or suggestions for future sessions as we continue to evolve this growing series to address topics and challenges of relevance to all of you working in this sector around the world. And with that, let's get started. Welcome to today's edition of Resetting the Stage. This session is entitled Two-Part Reinvention, Composers and Creativity in a Virtual World. It's great to see so many performing arts professionals joining us today from around the world. In today's edition of Resetting the Stage, as digital dissemination and the export of creative content is no longer limited in terms of distribution and the releasing of new piece, the panel explores the advantages the creation of compositions hold, be it through commissions performed for on-site, hybrid or streamed events, new concert series or festival, or through working in an artist collective. And now it is a distinct honor to welcome our illustrious panel. Latin Grammy nominated and winner of numerous prizes and fellowships, Gabriela Ortiz is one of the foremost composers in Mexico and one of the most vibrant musicians on the international scene. Her music has been commissioned by prestigious ensembles, soloists, and orchestras, including the LA Philharmonic, Gustavo Dudamel, and Esa-Pekka Salonen. Ms. Ortiz is professor of composition of Universidad Nacional Autónoma de Mexico in Mexico City and visiting professor at Indiana University. Her music is published by SHOT, Ediciones Mexicanas de Música, Sagiana Presto, and Tre Fontana. Gabriel Prokofiev, a London-based composer, producer, DJ, and founder of the non-classical record label, Gabriel Prokofiev has emerged at the forefront of a new approach to classical music in the UK. Recognized by Financial Times as being in the vanguard of redefining classical music conventions. Prokofiev's distinctive sound is informed by his background as a producer of hip-hop, grime, and electro record, as well as his earlier involvement in electroacoustic music at York and Birmingham universities, where he won a residency prize at the prestigious World International Electroacoustic Music Competition. David Ludwig, named one of the world's top 100 composers under 40 by NPR Music, David Serkin Ludwig holds position and residencies with nearly 24 orchestras and music festivals in the US and abroad. He has received commissions from many of the most recognized artists and ensembles of our time, including the Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Minnesota, and National Symphony Orchestra, to name just a few. He is chair of composition of the Curtis Institute of Music. Michael Gordon. Known for his extensive discography over the past 30 years, Michael Gordon has produced a strikingly diverse body of work, ranging from large-scale pieces for high-energy ensembles and major orchestral commissions, to works conceived specifically for the recording studio and kaleidoscopic works for groups of identical instruments. He is a co-founder and co-artistic director of New York's legendary music collective Bang on a Can. Frank J. Oteri, New York-based composer and music journalist, composer advocate at NewMusic USA, and the editor of its online magazine NewMusicBox, as well as vice president of International Society for Contemporary Music, and a board member of AIMIC. In his own musical compositions, Frank combines emotional directness with an obsession for formal processes. Our Q&A facilitator today will be Aliena Haig of Classical Next, who will return to the broadcast in the second half of today's discussion. But first, to begin, it is my pleasure to introduce today's moderator, Enrique Márquez, to set the stage for where our discussion begins. As concert violist, Enrique presented his debut recital at Carnegie Hall in 2005. From 2014 to 2016, he served as founding executive and artistic director of the Boca del Rio Philharmonic Orchestra and was a member of the design team of Foro Boca, an award-winning cultural center, home of the orchestra. He served as the youngest Secretary of Culture for the state of Veracruz in Mexico and was a member of advisory team to the Culture Committee of Mexico's Congress. He is a graduate of Harvard University where he currently serves as manager of events at the music department. Welcome again, and Enrique, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Gosa. It's a pleasure to be here among distinguished panel. I wanted to also welcome our audience members from all over the world. Bienvenidos todos los que hablan español. Es un gusto estar con ustedes. And we're going to be talking today about music composition, which I believe, along with performers, is the guiding spirit, the guiding force and voice of any musical endeavor. Through musical composition, novel and profound ideas are expressed. Innovative mediums of human thought come to life over and over again, making a lasting impact in our ears, minds, and spirit. Composers create and recreate regional and national and even global identities through their craft. They make the people heard and thoroughly and explicitly comment on world affairs, from Beethoven's Eroica Symphony, Shostakovich's Symphonies Nixon in China, to Gabriel Prokofiev's violin concerto commissioned to celebrate the 100th anniversary of World War I, Michael Gordon's campaign song for the Kronos Quartet, and Yanga by Gabriela Ortiz, commissioned by the LA Philharmonic. As we are in the midst of the first real-time global crisis, we have come to realize that we took music and the arts mostly for granted. Orchestras, ensembles, and musicians around the world struggle to earn a living today. Composers, as you know, wear many hats. They are multifaceted people. They're also often performers, producers, mentors, founders, and leaders of organizations and institutions. Today, we have the privilege of sharing the stage, the virtual stage, with 5 brilliant composers who have been transforming paradigms and proposing new approaches to music composition and collaboration among musicians and audiences. We hope to gain insight on their perspectives and vision for the present and future of music making. I'd like to ask Gosia now to post our first poll for the audience. If you like to please vote. The question is, are you an advocate for the development of ongoing music festivals? So it appears on your screen. Please take a moment to vote. We will be showing the result in a little bit. So continuing, we will begin the panel now. Unlike performers, composers are used to working on their own, in their own space. So perhaps the lockdown measures have not affected their daily lives so much. I'd like to begin to ask each panelist, give you guys 2 minutes to share where in the world you are, what you're up to these days, and how are you adapting to this condition, to the situation. So maybe we can begin with Frank, please.
I wasn't expecting to go first, but okay. Hi, everybody. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Well, I wear many hats. One of the hats I wear on a daily basis is the editor of NewMusicBox, and we are continuing to publish articles online and to do talks with people. We're an online publication, so we exist in this modality anyway, but we used to do talks with people in person in their homes, and now that's done via Zoom. So we're finding creative ways to redo things. In terms of the ISCM things, ISCM traditionally has a festival once a year that was supposed to happen in New Zealand in April. That did not happen, but we did have a virtual General Assembly in June, and we are planning on having a festival in Shanghai in 2021 in September. We'll see if that happens. And New Zealand has been rescheduled for 2022. And it is our hopes that in 2023, for our centenary year, we go to Africa for the very first time and have a festival in South Africa. On the Yamic end of things, once again, we had to cancel our conference in June, and we are finding a way to do a virtual conference. And in terms of my own, in December, and in terms of my own composing, I have to say, being in lockdown, it's true. It is kind of the natural state for being a composer, but I'm kind of a weird composer. I'm always out and about, which means I don't get to write music that much. So in a way, being under lockdown has been helpful to me. And I actually completed an orchestra piece, which hopefully is going to be done in South Dakota in late January by the South Dakota Symphony. So yeah, mixed bag. I always like to say I live in New York, but I'm frequently elsewhere. And now I say I'm under house arrest in New York City. So there we go.
Well, thank you, Frank. I know you're a very busy gentleman. Maybe we can go now to Gabriel Prokofiev.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. So yeah, I'm in London in the UK, and it's true. At first I thought I wasn't going to be that affected by lockdown, and I kind of thought, well, it's just business as usual. And I was lucky to have a commission of viola concerto that I've been working on, and then I got a surprise job doing the soundtrack to an Indian sci-fi series, which was really a lot of fun, and that was very immersive. But actually, at the same time, I think no one can not be affected by what's happening to everyone around them and to the planet overall with the pandemic. And so that did affect my inspiration. And actually, I found it hard to get into the viola concerto. I actually started doing some specific works relating to the pandemic, reacting to lockdown, some solo viola pieces first. So it's not all plain sailing. Obviously, a lot of concerts and live performances that I do were cancelled, so that was frustrating. But I do feel fortunate to be a composer and be able to find an outlet and a kind of therapy for this tough situation. So I'm very thankful for that, and I've also had a chance to work with some new equipment. I got a new this modular synthesis thing I started learning to use, and wrote some pieces for that, and marimba. That was fun. And quickly, NONCLASSICAL, the organization that I founded 16 years ago, that's a live events organization and a record label. And the live events obviously are all on hold, but NONCLASSICAL actually benefited from that in a way that it gave us more time to focus on the label and do a lot of catching up and investigating new artists to release. We released 2 lockdown compilations. So we contacted all our network and asked people to submit pieces that maybe they'd written during lockdown or that they had on a hard drive that they hadn't had a chance to release. And also we got a lot of our associate artists and composers to run seminars online. So we had a whole series, and we set up something called the NONCLASSICAL Academy. And that was a really exciting project. So we've actually kept very busy. I think that's the only way to survive this.
Thank you, Gabriel. I'm a violist. I'd love to hear your viola concerto when it's premiered. Maybe you can invite me. I'd love to be there.
Well, you're very welcome.
Thank you. Yeah. And now we go to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania with David Serkin Ludwig. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you. I think like a lot of people in this country and other countries, I haven't slept that much in the past 48 hours, but I promise I don't have the New York Times window open over here watching the results as they slowly don't come in. So as a composer, I've found since the virus and the quarantine, just to be really candid, I found it very hard to make art. I'm envious of those who are inspired by that time. I think it's amazing if you are. But as it says, I'm a teacher as well, and I work with a lot of young people, not just at Curtis. Curtis is very tiny, so we only have 5 composers, but at music festivals I go to and so forth, I've gotten to know a lot of young people, and many of them are having the same reaction. So finding alternatives to kind of inspire creativity for them to kind of ring the creative bell that we kind of hold in our hearts has been a challenge, but also something that's been very fruitful. What we lose, we're very solitary as composers when we're actually doing the act of composing. But for some of us, that means we need even more connections when we're outside of that. And to me, that's the thing that we've lost the most, is the connections and the social interactions. So just talking to a lot of young people, how can we use technology? How can we you know, what I have students doing at Curtis is working very closely with colleagues, their other student performers, to really develop pieces, to use electronics. And that's been a big part of my work at the school since the pandemic, just to try to modernize, to move forward something that was inevitable anyway, but that we're in a position that we have to look at now and take very seriously.
Thank you so much, David. And maybe we can go to Gabriela Ortiz. How are you, Gabby? Are you on mute? We can hear you. Can you unmute your?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. I'm in Mexico City. I think that I have to divide my time into different lives. One, the virtual life, and the other, my inner life. No, my inner space in my studio, and all this, you know, time for being able to reflect about the situation. In the virtual life, you know, like, I think that as everybody having meetings via Zoom, teaching, I'm a professor at the university, and so I have been teaching via Zoom, which is not the best, but I have to do it. But in this other space, in my inner side, I think I have to reinvent myself. And for me, I think that the physical space became fundamental to my subsistence in this strange and forced abnormality that all too soon has become the new normal in our lives. And I think that within this unprecedented and atypical circumstance, I had no choice but come to terms with the fact that that silence will make its presence now for a time, whereas the awareness of sound and its strength will take on new meaning. I think that when the new normal began, I became aware of the inevitable necessity of musical creating an inner space of reflection that would mirror what all of us were experiencing. I think that for me was very important. And of course, it had a very, very huge impact in my work, in my creative work. So those are my reflections.
Thank you so much, Gabriela. And lastly, I would like to ask Michael Gordon about how are you doing today?
Okay, hi everybody, and thanks so much, Enrique. Yeah, you know, like probably everyone here was writing something that is now going to happen in 2022 or beyond, and you know, all of a sudden lockdown. I'm not a big composer of piano music, but I started writing for the piano. It was kind of like comfort food, you know. It's like all of a sudden the piano felt really good, and I started writing these little 1-minute pieces, and I would write them and send them over to Vicky Chow, who's the pianist in the Bang on a Can All-Stars. And we decided, I wrote 31 of them. We decided that we would release them one a day during the month of July. The set of pieces is called July. One of the things that I found was, you know, it's very hard to keep track of time. And both of us thought, well, you know, one a day, it's something some way to keep track of the month of July. Right at the end of June, I called this fantastic choreographer, performance artist, and dancer, Brian Brooks. Those are up, by the way, still up on her, on her Instagram account. I called, so we released them one a day just on Instagram. I called Brian Brooks, and he jumped in on the project. So every day at noon, Vicky would play one of these pieces on Instagram. Brian would get the music. He created a dance. He posted his thing at night, also on Instagram, only on Instagram. He's at Brian Brooks _. Those are still up. So one way I kind of feel like, you know, find the concert hall, and so Instagram or Facebook or however you can. Now with Bang on a Can, we had a festival planned in May that in Brooklyn called Long Play that had over 50 concerts. It was, of course, all postponed, canceled, and we just decided to start doing online streams of 6-hour marathons. We've done 4 since then. The feeling out here is people are hit hard, but performing artists and composers, they're hit the hardest. And so we decided, everything's short. It's been all solo pieces. I think we've been we've presented over 200 composers and performers since May. We've commissioned 40 pieces of music. They're all short. It's not it's not a big thing, but people are they're very happy to perform. And people say, I've been in bed for 2 months and thank you so much. I've got, something to do, and I've got something to be nervous about. And at least I'm playing for something. We've had a great audience there. 5,000 to 10,000 people come by for every one of these streams. Some stay for, hours, and some watch one thing and leave. And it's been, that's been free online, but we encourage people, hey, buy a ticket. And I think, 300, 400, 500 people every time we do this buy tickets. So it's, it's working, and it's exciting.
Oh, thank you so much, Michael. It's been great to see the marathons online. I would like to ask Gosia now to share the results of our first poll. So as we can see, 65% of you are for the development of ongoing festivals, online festivals. 17% of you are not for the development of festivals online, and 17% of you don't know. So most people are for, more festivals going online. Thank you so much. We will have another poll later. I will ask you to complete it in a moment. And I'd like to ask individual questions to our panelists. I would like to begin, if I may, with Gabriel Prokofiev. So I wanted to ask you, Gabriel, you're a composer, a producer, a DJ, an artistic director of NonClassical, which is a label and a performance venue. I wanted to ask, what is your outlook on the coming years regarding the production of online and hybrid musical genres? Do you think there will be a greater emphasis on these mediums, or will we go back to normal once this pandemic is hopefully resolved in the not so long future?
Well, I think personally, I can't wait to go back to normal, actually, and enjoy some live concerts, to be honest, because that is the really unique thing about classical music in particular. That experience of it being in a group of other people, this social experience of enjoying a musical journey together. And certainly for non-classical, our whole remit was to bring classical music out of the concert hall into more everyday venues, more unconventional spaces, and help normalize it, and share our music with wide people. So I am hoping that there will be a kind of return to normal, but this has been a wake-up call, I think, for music and for composers, and particularly getting us to kind of realize that maybe our music needs to be more in tune with the online world. There are composers who are already in tune, but I think a lot of people are still very focused on the live concert, the chamber and the orchestral format. And actually, we need to kind of catch up with a lot of other music makers out there and make sure that our music works better online. I think that's the big takeaway, I think. And it's about composers composing music that is for home listening, for headphone listening, for streaming listening, which is such a different aesthetic to a concert piece when you have people kind of captive in the hall and they're going to follow. Whereas on streaming, people have playlists, they switch between tracks just like that. The whole listening habits have changed. And I think it's at our peril that we actually ignore those changes, and we can write them off and say, oh, well, the young generation, they've got short concentration spans, they're not listening properly. Or instead we can say, okay, here's a challenge. There are people who are listening to music in a different way. We need to grab their attention. We need to make music that draws them in, and we need to make music that's produced in a way that sounds good on an iPhone, on headphones. and these are horrible challenges. We much prefer to write for a hall with a fantastic acoustic and a big string section, but actually lockdown has made us realize if we want to make music that people will bother to listen to, it has to work even on laptop speakers, or if it's, or it has to be something that can be performed by just a couple or one performer with electronics. So I'm certainly thinking a lot about new formats, about maybe writing electronic parts that then people can play the piano with at home. Some simple piano music even for beginners, but that will be a really satisfying kind of immersive experience, a collaborative experience for them. So I think actually that's a really positive thing we can take out of this situation is making sure that our music isn't just for the concert hall, and that we write pieces that either have various versions, or we write new repertoire that's specifically for streaming and for video sharing as well. And obviously it needs to be high quality. So I think that's what the other wake-up call for composers is, to educate themselves in better with basic studio techniques, perhaps learn more about using electronics in their music, or at least, or alternatively find performer partners who can use that equipment and build relationships so they can get their music recorded quickly and get it out there. That's the thing, to be able to not to be waiting for the performers and the commissions, actually improve our self-sufficiency.
Wow. Thank you so much. That sounds fascinating. I look forward to seeing the works for electronics and performer. That'd be great too.
I can share some links of some works myself, and the compilations we released on Non-Classical, for example. A lot of those were people reacting to the situation, recording by themselves or with a friend, or electronic pieces. I had a percussion piece for electronics and marimba, but in the end I didn't have time to get the percussionist to play the marimba part, so in the end it was my fake marimba that went on the album. But that's the situation we're dealing with, so you try and make it work.
Tangle with this summer commissioned a string quartet to be performed in 4 individual places, so that each musician could play, with their camera, with their computer, and all of them come together because of the situation. So I wonder do you think that will become more and more normalized?
Oh God, I've got my son is hammering on the front door. He can't get in, but I'll quickly. I think so. The problem we have is with the technology available to us at home, often people don't have quite good enough cameras or microphones, so that and sometimes the streaming, there's a slight delay. So that's one area that we need to all kind of invest in, and hope that internet speeds will improve, because everyone's online at the same time now, so the whole world's broadband has sort of slowed down a bit. But I do think that's certainly been a trend for people to do these camera link ups, and I think if the technology can allow it, I think it is a good way of working together for sure.
Thank you, Gabriel. I'd like to turn to Michael now, Michael Gordon, and ask you, Michael, about Bang on a Can. Well, you mentioned a little bit previously how you guys are dealing with or working now with online marathons, but how is Bang on a Can adapting to the situation at present, and how do you foresee festivals and concert series going forward? You guys are a force of nature, and you are always touring and performing. Do you think there'll be an emergence of online and hybrid models for festivals going forward?
Yeah, it's a great question, and of course that's about the future, so we don't know. But we jumped into this online streaming, and like Gabriel said, it's a learning curve. Everyone's figuring out how to use microphones and video cameras at home, and how to do the link up. But I don't think it's going to go away, even when we get back to live concerts, and God willing, we're all together and we can all be in the same place and hear music. That's going to be an amazing day. But I don't think it's going to go away for this reason, because it broadens everyone's reach. And we've been doing these marathons, and we can track our audience and you know, the number one place the audience comes from is the United States, but the number two place the audience comes from is Brazil. So that would have been, that might seem like a surprise. It was certainly, certainly a surprise to us. I don't know, we've never been to Brazil. I've never been to Brazil. Bang on a Can has never been to Brazil. I don't know why people in Brazil I don't know how they found us, but once you've made that connection, I don't think you want to let go of it. So I think streaming is going to be folded in to our events in the future. And it could be that, as Gabriel is imagining, some people are going to become, you know, very adept at just performing and composing for, you know, virtual mediums.
Yeah, I'd like to briefly ask, if I may, David Serkin. You are the artistic director of the Curtis Summer Fest. I saw that you guys kind of went online this summer. How did that work out? And do you foresee in future summers doing perhaps hybrid models to have more people from around the world join? And if you can share about Curtis Fest, sorry, please go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was actually involved in a number of festivals this summer. Some with orchestras where I had residencies and they wanted to build a young composer or actually adult composer program in one case. Others, there was one in Ecuador, the Festival Guaranda. There was one in Santiago, Chile, you know, where they see opportunities to bring composers together. And one thing about teaching composition, you know, when I speak to colleagues who teach instruments, it's a real challenge, of course, and they have to really jump through hoops to even get a decent sound to come through. Teaching composition actually has some advantages. I mean, we all want to be person to person, face to face, but there's a lot you can do if you have like a base level tech savvy where you can kind of bring all kinds of media in front of students that might be actually even harder to do if you were live. So the thing I noticed with being online, so yeah, you mentioned the Curtis Young Artist Summer Program. That was a festival where we would bring in 100 students from around the world every summer for 3 weeks. And it was really a kind of pre-conservatory experience for younger students going into college. This year we had 234 students, so we were able to more than double it. And I was able to have 56 composers, young composers. It's one of the largest programs for young composers I've ever seen. And then taking a cue from Michael and thinking about Bang on a Can a lot, we had a kind of incredible marathon of their music that we just put up. They all came in, they all wrote solo pieces for the faculty to play. There was a feedback process where they would do an initial recording and then give visual notes and say, you know, this doesn't work as well, I'll try this, or, you know, this multiphonic might sound better this way. And the big takeaway from me was how important community is between composers and between artists, and just how much of a difference that makes for the young people to have something rather than nothing. And, you know, just looking on social media or so forth, the impact was huge. And they all came away with actually very fine recordings of their work and grew enormously from the experience. So, you know, if it's a question of what we're going to do with festivals, we need to keep having festivals because festivals are communities and we need community. And if that's hybrid, if that's online, if it's in person or whatever it is, I think it's really urgent for us in music as artists to be living in communities with each other.
Thank you. And lastly, Gabriel, if I may ask you about non-classical, I know you did an academy now online. So do you foresee keeping a hybrid model in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think what both David and Michael have said, and I agree, is that what we've learned actually is suddenly we have this much bigger international reach when we do these online events, and you know that's something we've experienced as well, and that's really exciting. So I think again, it's partly to do with the technology, how you can make that work. I mean, we're certainly in terms of our live events, it's very much about the physicality of interesting spaces for the performances. But I think we will try, and the academy has worked really well, and so I think we will try to continue that. I mean, it's whether we can do satisfactory live streaming of live events. That's always a challenge for it to be really watchable. But I think, yeah, it's something we're going to continue because of those international relationships you build.
Thank you.
Can I add one thing to that, Enrique?
Sure, of course.
You know, the impact on equity and inclusion that we can have being online is in some ways more direct. And so if you have a festival with composers who maybe didn't have the resources to get on a plane and fly to the East Coast or West Coast or England or wherever, and maybe didn't have resources for tuition that can be lowered because you're online, you can still offer a tremendous number of benefits to those composers. And in our case this summer, we were able to waive and really recruit and be very intentional, waive tuition and be very intentional about who we were able to invite in ways that we couldn't as much when it was more tuition dependent. So that is another really bright spot about being remote and using technology, is that you can really think very strongly about equity and creating access for people. Thank
you, David. I'd like to just remind Gabriela, you want to say something?
Yes, just in addition to this, just to give you a very nice example of, you know, the advantage of having a virtual summer course. I was invited to teach at Baudin Festival this summer, and two of my students got accepted to join the summer course, but they didn't have any money at all. I mean, it was so expensive for them. I mean, just think about the situation in Latin America, and especially the situation in Mexico. UNAM is a public university, so my students really they didn't have any money even to buy the airplane ticket. So I talked to Derek about it, and we were figuring out how to, you know, to do some kind of fundraising for these students in order to be able to travel to US for this summer course. And finally, when, you know, the pandemic came, they did the virtual course, and they were able to attend somehow, and they were so excited, and they composed 2 pieces for the festival. And then these performers in US performed their pieces, and they couldn't believe. I mean, they were just listening to all these, you know, conferences and lectures. So in a way, that was great for them. I mean, at least, you know, having nothing, or, you know, having this virtual kind of experience changed their lives, I think, in a very good way. And also they produce videos, so they have their video and their piece performed, and so they were very excited. So this is a nice story that sometimes we can use technology for a good reason. And in this case, it was a good reason.
Thank you, Gabriela. And I'd like to continue with you, if I may. I'd like to ask about Latin America. How are Latin American composers dealing with this at present? And how do you see how they embracing the situation right now?
Well, I think that, you know, thinking about this, I think that both ways are going to subsist. The live music, which is very important and it's magic and it's unique, but also the virtual, you know, way of, you know, doing projects using technology. I think that both ways of create music are going to subsist in this. But something that it really worries me, and especially in Latin America, is that we have a huge amount of offer online that is for free. And my question is, you know, especially for freelance musicians, they need to survive. So if people is so used to not, I mean, the question is, if we are going to pay a ticket for an online concert, if we are going to do that, I'm not really sure if in Latin America, this is going to be successful. And my point is, what is going to happen in the future if there are no enough concerts, or how our artists or our performers are going to survive when without not having the support of you know, a salary and the box office money and all of that, it worries me a little bit, because people is very used, and especially I've seen this in Latin America. All of us, we are so used to have free things online, and the offering is incredible, it's huge, it's big. So what is going to happen in the future? I mean, if we come back to the kind of a normal life again, what's going to happen in the situation of the live music? That's one of the questions. And in terms of Mexico, I think the university, especially the University of Mexico, has been doing a lot of interesting things, a lot of announcements for different hybrid projects and getting commissions. So he's doing a very important role, especially right now, that, you know, commissioning composers and commissioning and helping for performers in order to do projects that could be conceived online. And but again, my worry is about, you know, this chamber ensemble, the small chamber ensembles, like, for example, Onyx, this ensemble dedicated to contemporary music, or Tambuco, which is this incredible percussion quartet. Or I'm figuring out those kind of ensembles that work independently in Mexico, and they don't have a subsidized by the government, which in the case of Mexico, you play in an orchestra, you have a subsidized by the government. So at least your salary at this moment is not taking any risk. But what about these other groups? What about these other independent, you know, performers? I think they are suffering. And also, what about commissions for composers? I mean, this is something very difficult in Mexico. We have a system of scholarships that also is for our endowment for the arts, that it's doing a very important role, because they give scholarships to composers, but it's never enough. It's never enough, so we need more. And those are difficult times in those terms.
Absolutely. I'd like to turn to Frank and carry on this conversation about institutions. So Frank, if I may ask you, you know, given your impressive scope of your creative work, and as a leader of multiple organizations, what do you consider the role of institutions going forward in way of supporting the creation and dissemination of new music?
Well, I should just say I'm not a leader of any organization. I'm within, you know, staffs and leadership groups within organizations, and that's a very important distinction for me. I think, you know, what I'm interested in, both across the nation in the US and internationally, is, you know, are ways to advocate for this music, to incentivize, to inspire, to help cull resources, to help reinforce best practices, and to encourage. You know, that's the role that I wear on the professional, you know, non-composing part of what I do. I don't know if that answers your question, but if you want more specifics.
No, thank you. I mean, it's just, at present in Latin America and in some European countries, the government subsidizes salaries of orchestras, performers. In the US, not so much, on other than universities, organizations. So maybe Michael, what do you think? I mean, I know it's very complicated now for performers and composers to earn a living who are unemployed. Do you think we will learn a lesson from this going forward?
Well, one of the things that we did at New Music USA, under the leadership of our CEO, Vanessa Reed, and with a consortium of composers from around the country, is we established a solidarity fund, which people applied to immediately after the pandemic hit, and we were all under quarantine, where people could apply and get a $500 grant for after they declared money that was lost from revenue from performances. And this was in the first few months. And that's a small thing. And obviously, you know, there was only ultimately a small amount of money to give out, but it helped quite a number of people. It was a beginning, and we're now looking at ways to go further with that, to do direct help for composers, specifically to have a fund for that. So, you know, these are ongoing things. Yes, it is a challenge when there is no direct government sponsorship for this sector. And it's interesting. I think everybody needs to lobby to the fact that, you know, various industries have lobbied and have gotten support to show how they were hurt. The arts sector, composers, performing musicians, all of it are very key to so many economies all around the world. You know, people go to concerts, and if they're going to concerts in the evening, they're taking transportation to and from. They're going to restaurants generally, or having a drink at the bar, or whatever it is they're doing. So the arts, music specifically, the performing arts are an integral part of the economy. And once you see, I think what the pandemic has done is you see how various fields have really been hurt. You know, we're of the music sector, the restaurant sector has been really, really devastated. The dry cleaning sector, you know, believe it or not, I mean, think about it. You know, people aren't having their clothes dry cleaned anymore because they're not going out anymore. So, you know, all of these things tie together. And I think we need to make a better argument in our field about how our sector is connected to all of these other sectors.
Thank you. Michael, anything you'd like to add about the US at present in the situation?
Well, Frank is 100% right about this. I mean, you know, in New York City, the number one industry is tourism, and the number one reason people come to New York is to be involved in some kind of artistic endeavor, to go to a museum or a concert or a play or something like that. So, but you know, artists are living a freelance life, and you know how they're basically unorganized, and they've been hit really, really hard. You know, there's a stimulus, you lost your job, the government, you know, is going to send you some money. But if you're living, you know, if you're a freelance, you know, cellist or something like that, you can't file for that. You know, there's no way to access that. So here's the, you know, in a certain sense, creative world fueling all this, you know, the economy, as Frank has said so beautifully, but you know, is not really getting credit for doing that.
Thank you. I'd like to briefly talk to the audience. You're welcome to ask any panelists, any composers, any question you like. So we ask that you please do that on the chat box. I'll maybe address who you want to ask and your question. And then after this panel, we will have a Q&A with you guys, so you can ask directly to our panelists. And if I may, David, go back to education. I think that's a fascinating topic always. But I mean, given the plethora of online mediums for music making today, in your role as a mentor, do you envision a further disruption in the way we're training young and up-and-coming composers?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that's been continually disrupted. I went to Oberlin for my undergrad, and there the library boasted that it had 80,000 recordings in it. That was the big deal. And now I have like 5 million here in my hand, you know? So I think the act of making music and writing music is one, as far as we can go back, is constantly being disrupted. I think it's the pace right now that's the big difference, the speed at which we need to adapt and change. So, you know, people should be able to write their music without needing to learn how to use Macs, for instance, or patch things. People should be able to write the music that they write. But in terms of the delivery, that's a really important thing, and figuring out how that works. How do you distribute your music and get it out there? So, you know, the students we have now, there's that term digital natives. I mean, I grew up on a dirt bike, and they grew up with, like, you know, brain implants, basically, you know, where they can access any information. And I say, oh, you know, why don't you go check this out? And the next week it's like the Matrix, they're plugged in and they've gone on YouTube, and they're incredible autodidacts, right? They just teach themselves. So, you know, I think the whole relationship between students and teachers has changed enormously too. And students are questioning the nature of that authority, which I think is is welcome, because it can become more collaborative then, where the teachers and the students, it's unclear who's who at a certain point. But in terms of institutions, I think it's really incumbent on every teaching institution to assume a responsibility to be thinking about equity, access, preparing students for project-based careers. And as someone pointed out, you know, composers, I'd say the closest thing we have to a union is our organizations like New Music USA. And thank God for them, because we also need to be able to communicate and see the best ways that we are able to advocate for ourselves and make careers, you know, so, and share whatever resources we can. So, yeah, the landscape of teaching young musicians, not just young composers, is changing hugely. I have seen some schools go the direction of, like, you know, how to cultivate Instagram followers. I don't think that's a very lasting approach, but understanding what you put out into the world and the difference between that and a live performance, I think, is incredibly important. It's been that way for me in my career. You know, I had a number of commissions that are postponed now, and yet organizations still want to do interviews. They still want to build some hype around it. They still want to think, can we have an online version of the piece first and then premiere it live down the road? So thinking about all that is, I think, at the center of where we're at right now.
Gabriela, anything you'd like to add about education in Mexico?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. I think that the main problem in Mexico is the access of technology, because here we have to deal with economical problems. For example, one of my students, he only has one computer for the whole family. So when I've been teaching, I just realized that he's in a single room, and it's very difficult because there is only one computer, and he needs to share the computer with his brothers and sisters and her mother. And, you know, and it's a huge problem. And the mother is cooking, and the little boy is running. So it's complicated. I mean, how many people in Mexico have access to computers? Not everyone, not everyone. How many people has access to technology is the main problem. I mean, we can keep going with, you know, teaching like this, but it's a problem, because just think about the performers in the music faculty at the university. People doesn't have, I mean, the harpist, they need to go to the faculty if they want to play their instruments. So they don't have those instruments at home. Think about the double bass players, the percussionists. So it's a huge problem. I mean, they can practice. I mean, it's I think the access of technology, or the access to those kinds of things, is an economical problem, at least in Mexico, that we have to take in mind.
I think that's a huge consideration. And even just as people are putting in the chat, even the simple connection of the internet, just that alone. This brings forward issues of equity and privilege. Curtis is, or where I teach is, it's a free school. Like, there's no tuition, you know, and yet there are students, I think many students actually, who don't have any device or any way to communicate. They don't have some big computer set up where they can be running Logic here and Max there and whatever. And so because the school's in such a privileged position, it can address that. But what do we do for, like, everywhere else where students don't have access to technology? And yet, if they're not able to put out there what they're doing, it's a little bit of a tree in a forest, right? I mean, we as composers, if we do not have the performance of our music, or the realization, the live experience of our music, in a way it does not exist, right? Like a playwright writing plays that are never produced with an actor or actors, it kind of sits on the shelf. So I think what Gabriela is pointing out is incredibly important to understanding what needs to happen for us to make the most out of this situation.
Thank you so much. I'd like to ask Gosha if she can post the results for the second poll that we asked, see what people are thinking. So 90% pretty much foresee live streaming continuing and gathering force past the current situation. 5% don't, and 6% don't know. So we'll see. I'd like to maybe ask one last question that is not related so much to technology, but is related to the situation that we're living at present. As we of course know, we're living in a bit of a social turmoil. There is Brexit, there is the Paris Accord that the US left yesterday. The US has been in a very messy situation for the past 4 years. So to ask you composers, do this political social affairs affect your creation at present and perhaps going forward? Frank.
Yeah, and I have to say, you say 4 years. On a very personal note, it has been very hard for me to compose music in the last 4 years. That part of my life has been really, really challenged. And, ironically, during the pandemic, at first I was, even more kind of, I totally relate to what David was saying. It was even harder to create. And I was asked to write this piece and I didn't think I could do it. And I just did it. And I'm so happy I did it because, then the election happened. I thought if I hadn't completed that piece, there's no way in hell that I would be able to work on it now. I just can't. But I think, a lot of artists have this feeling and it's because of empathy. I think that, I always say, we're the people who know that we're composers. I think everyone has the ability to be a composer. We're the ones who know and who are actually composing. And I think the reason why is, we have this empathy. And when our music relates to other people, it's because we can channel that empathy and they can feel that empathy. And because of that, it makes it even more difficult to create work when things are so turbulent. But some people are able to channel that and create amazing work in response to it, and I say all the more power to them. The other night, there was an amazing performance at Roulette of a brilliant, I use the word jazz, but what he is so far, it encompasses jazz and so many other things. Darius Jones, who wrote a searing work called We Can Change the Country. That was a direct response to this current moment, and it was extraordinarily powerful. It's online. I think you can still catch it on Roulette's webpage. It's a Vimeo stream. So bravo to anybody who's able to create work that directly responds to that. The work that I created was very personal. It was in response, so many people died of COVID, including my mother and including two people who live in this building. And my work was a response to that.
So sorry about that, Frank. Yeah. Anybody else would like to share about that? About that topic?
Yeah, well, I can jump in, but Frank, yeah, sorry to hear about your mama. We talked earlier over the summer, and yeah, that's heavy. I think that this time period, I think it's really important for all creative people to feel the obligation to be inspired. And that may sound funny, because I think, people, there's a reason why there are creative people. Someone, wakes up and they spend their day doing something, they have a job and they're doing something and it doesn't fulfill them enough, and they want to do something, they want something more, and the world needs creative people. For 10,000 years, it's been very clear that this lifts up the spirits and the souls of people. And I think about, in a difficult time period, I think about a lot about like being on a plane with my daughter, and if the plane is shaking, she's very scared and she's looking at me, and I'm scared too, but I know I can't portray that fear, and I know I have to be calm, and I've got to say, hey, it's okay, and right now, anytime that the world is in a difficult situation, creative people have to really tap into that and share it and let people know, hey, we have souls, we have spirits, we're going to feed them, and we're not going away.
Thank you. Gabriel.
I would just add that, yeah, we've got to remember the unifying and social power that art and music has. And when we are in these difficult times and often divided times, if you talk about from the UK perspective of how the country kind of got divided by the Brexit situation, actually hopefully we can use music to explore the situation and exploit its therapeutic powers, and bring people together and show them that we've got much more in common than the differences we have. And there's a project I'm doing with a whole bunch of composers. We're writing pieces for a viol consort called Fretwork. So the viol consort, it's the oldest sort of British alternative to a string quartet, that it kind of lost out to the string quartet because the string quartet's a lot louder. But there's kind of renewal of the viol consort, and so we're going to do a journey of British music with living composers writing new versions, new interpretations of British music from the 13th century through to a lot of pop songs from the last 50, 60 years, and sort of exploring what is British identity, and people had this idea, and that's partly what led to Brexit, different concepts of what it meant to be British. And so we're doing a project like that, and we're hoping that it will actually unite people and realize we have a shared history, no matter where we roots are. If we live in in Great Britain, that somehow we are connected and can come together through music. And I think similar things this kind of approach can work in America as well, because I think actually across the political boundaries there's a lot of shared love for similar art, and those things are so important, and we have to remember that.
Thank you so much. I would like to now invite our classical next friend Alina to come up and do the Q&A with our panelists and the questions from the audience members.
Hello. Yes, thank you, Enrique. We have had so many questions come in. This is such a fascinating discussion going on, and we're dealing with lots of topics here. But I firstly thank you to our audience members who are being so enthusiastic with this. I hope that we can cover as much ground as possible. And I think we're going to just dive straight in, if that's okay. Starting off with a question for you, Gabriel. This one comes from Henry Vega from the Artec Foundation in The Hague, Netherlands. How can the technology improve to adjust music to continued online experience?
I mean, I'm not a techno wizard, so I mean, I think it's there's one element of us as individuals researching what software and technology is out there that can best serve our needs, especially for live streaming, and you have to kind of educate yourself a bit. I mean, I think we certainly need better, good microphone setups for when it comes to music, and then the highest quality streaming rates possible. So I mean, if he's asking, how would I like it to improve? I guess it's just better access to the internet. I mean, we've said as well that people don't have the access, so it's actually something that is happening, but it feels like we need to speed the rate of change so that all the fiber optic connections, which are much faster, do become more accessible to more people. My wife is half Congolese, and in Congo Brazzaville, a very poor country in Central Africa, they actually have a big fiber optic cable that comes under the Atlantic Ocean. And so sometimes you can go to an internet cafe and have super fast internet even there. So the network is spreading, and it's about making sure that there's that accessibility, I guess. And then us as the individuals who want to broadcast our music, we need to make sure we have good web cameras. I know you can connect video cameras directly to the computer, so you get a higher quality, a more attractive looking image, good lighting, all of those things. Unfortunately, we're kind of forced into all being home film producers, recording producers. There's a lot of challenges. Then, of course, it's about, perhaps that's when we can collaborate more with people in those fields, because there are a lot of people maybe who are looking for extra work, people from the television area. So, it's about finding good partners as well to help the broadcasting.
Yeah.
I hope that helps.
Yeah. Well, actually, that leads quite nicely to the next question, which is directed at Frank Oteri. It comes from Shoshana Klein of McGill University, graduate and teaching artist. And do you think that the institutions that you are all part of are better or worse situated to deal with these problems of virtual issues than smaller, more versatile organizations? It seems that a lot of larger institutions have had trouble pivoting towards more innovative solutions for understandable reasons.
Well, it's interesting. The various institutions I'm part of, New Music USA, which I'm a staff member of, and then ISCM and YAMIC, which I sit on the boards of, represent a large constituency, but we are all three of those organizations are tiny. We are small organizations, so there is no way that we're big institutions with large staffs. We all have small staffs. In the case of ISCM and YAMIC, we're the board. We don't really even have staff, so to speak of. So we're incredibly nimble. We're all of these organizations are trying to find ways to help our constituencies through this medium and to do things online. And as I said earlier, to encourage best practices, to really serve as an advocate for them. So I can't really speak as somebody coming from larger institutions. What I will say, though, as an observer to all of this, and as a journalist following all of this, it's very interesting seeing the large institutions and how they're trying to deal with it, and how various decisions made at large institutions have trickled down to smaller entities. For example, a large orchestra or a large opera house canceling their entire season, and that having a ripple effect on so many other institutions. I think it's interesting. For me, I didn't take the pandemic seriously all through early March. I thought, this is going to blow over in a couple of weeks, and then the Broadway theaters shut down. And I'm like, this is something. So, there is something that large entities do that make a loud impact, and because of their communications networks, their channels, their ability to get the word out, and people look to them. So all I can say is I'm hopeful that there have been a number of leadership changes at a number of large institutions, and there are good people at a number of these large organizations who are trying to figure out ways past these issues, both in terms of how to deal with the pandemic and in terms of how to deal with equity, diversity, and inclusion issues, which have become so central to our thinking. And it's amazing, it took some horrible, well-publicized incidents of this year to call our attention to that. It's not like these incidents weren't happening throughout our entire lifetimes. These are things that we should have been paying attention to for a very long time. But I do think that the arts sector is ahead of the game than other sectors are, and I think we need to be, and I think we need to be the leaders and the role models for the rest of the community to do better as a society.
Yeah, okay, great. Well, actually, speaking of equity, this is a question from Bethany Reed in Canada, and it's for Gabriela. How can women and Black, Indigenous, and people of color composers be supported as we respond to the new challenges?
Wow, this is always a difficult, very, very difficult question. I think that it's very important that to notice that, yes, we have gender issues and racist issues, which we cannot deny. I think that they are all there. But the question here as an artist, or the way I feel things, is that if someone invites me to a festival and they don't want to play my piece because I'm a woman or because I'm a Latin American composer, of course that will be totally wrong. But again, if someone chooses me because I'm a woman and I'm Latin American, it's also wrong. Because if someone wants to play my music, it's also because I guess that I have an artistic quality in my work, which for me, it's very important. So it's complicated because when we see that, for example, Orwan Newwood was the first Austrian composer in 100 years to perform an opera at the Vienna Opera House, is unbelievable. I cannot believe that, you know, there are a lot of women composers out there. And it's incredible to think that she was one of the first women composers to have an opera in 21st century. It's hard to believe. It's very, very hard. But also in terms of, I mean, my impression is also that Europe is only looking to Europe. They never looked what is going on in Latin America. And we really have a very good composers in Latin America. But are part of our curriculum in the universities? No. I mean, I remember once I invited a Polish composer to my class and I asked him, how much do you know about Mexican composers? He couldn't answer. I mean, how many composers do you know? No, I mean, he couldn't say anyone, and he was traveling to Mexico. And then I asked him, ask my students how many Polish composers they know. And they mentioned Lutosławski. I mean, they mentioned a lot of composers. So why is that? I mean, why we have to look to Europe? I mean, as a Latin America in my class, but Europe never looks to us. I mean, we don't exist. I mean, if you look at a lot of books by music since 1945, Oxford University Press, and you look for Latin American music, and what you find is conga, Latin American instruments. So that's what you could get, a conga. So I think that we need to break all these things and to let them know that we exist and we are a very, very huge continent, very rich and also very different. Because also when I have a program, sometimes I really get tired that if my music is going to play, it's going to play in a concert that has this concept. Oh, fiesta, Latin American fiesta. I'm very tired that all the time, if my music is going to play internationally, they have to put me, I mean, they have to categorize my music in this kind of context, no? And you know, we have to break these stereotypes, because Latin America is a huge continent. Mexico is so different from Argentina or Brazil or Chile or Colombia. I mean, we have lots of things in common, but also we are very different in many ways. And we need to break all these stereotypes about what people is expecting about us. No, about, oh, fiesta, rhythm, happiness, or I don't know. I mean, those kind of things, and that happens in these other, you know, issues. So it's a main problem. I think that it's something that yeah, it needs to pay attention immediately.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Gabriela. I think that brings us nicely to our next question, which comes from Peter Traver in the US from the Z Festival Arts. It's a question for Michael. How loosely do you define music going into a new compositional idea? How do you successfully expand the boundaries of thought that people apply to music?
Wow, that sounds like a question from a composer, and it sounds like shop talk to me. I'd love to have that conversation with you, but I don't want to take up time right now for this panel, but you can just Michael at bangonacan.org and send me a note, and I'm happy to talk music with you.
All right, we'll do that then. Maybe if you want to drop that email address into the chat box then, and we can pass it on. We've had a question come through from Felipe Meza from the Orquesta Filarmónica in Bogota. He says, I am an arranger and composer. However, I'm mainly a percussion player. That is why the lack of contact with people, the lack of interaction affects me as it does others. I asked David how to recover the capacity for production and creative work with those of us who have no inspiration or motivation in isolation to write music. So David, that's for you, and I'll make that the last question of the round.
Wow, that's huge. I mean, this is something that I think challenges everyone, even people who are not musicians or composers. How do we connect with each other? How do we share empathy and compassion and warmth over Zoom? I think the words that we use are very, very important. And thinking about people and asking, just inquiring about people and how they are. But, you know, in terms of the music end of things, there is definite, you know, reaching out to composers, reaching out to performers, and just asking for any collaboration to send, here's a PDF of something I've been working on. In a way, it's not even about the realization of a piece or the, you know, the inside, you know, getting inside a piece of music. It's just fundamentally about sharing something and having it received and returned to you. So it's a very broad question and very difficult, but I guess maybe I don't, maybe someone else wants to take that question too. Or not.
No, no one wants to tackle it.
I just want to say, David, you're very good on Zoom. So, you know, you're projecting. So you're projecting empathy, and you could definitely inspire us all.
Thank you, Michael. And in real life, I'm a total jerk. Make it clear.
Yeah, I mean, if I can add to that, I mean, Zoom is what we have for now. You know, these are the modes that we have, and we're able to have this conversation that's taking place. You know, we're all locked in our own various places, but we're all in different places, and we're able to have this conversation. So that's a good thing. And ideally, I take to heart very much what Gabriela was saying about places that do not have the access. And I've been saying this, you know, for over 20 years. I got involved with what was then the American Music Center, creating this web magazine, NewMusicBox. So we thought, okay, we're going to reach all of these people with new music that we were never able to reach before, but you can only reach people with an internet connection. So I think the next step is we need to really make sure that people have access and have that access. And yeah, we're never going to replace the kind of in-person things, but we're creating new kinds of experiences. We can interact with people in a somewhat personal way all over the world. We were never able to do that before. We need to make sure that everybody has that access, especially, you know, younger emerging people and even older people who are discovering their artistic selves. You know, we need to encourage that, and we need to find ways to be there for them, whether it's Zoom, whether it's something else. So that's a positive note I wanted to stand on.
I read that there was a 68% increase in people taking up instruments, which is very nice. That's very promising. And just to agree with what Frank said, you know, in the Jewish tradition, if you lose a family member, you are compelled to go to temple every day for a month and be surrounded by no less than 10 people. I think there's a kind of wisdom there about the importance of not letting yourself close up, and instead to really force yourself actually to communicate. And the fact that we have this technology is crazy. You know, it's crazy that we have this, like, oh, look, here you are on my watch kind of thing. So I think that's something to be grateful for, that we can have these conversations and reach out to each other in the first place. And even if it's 50% of what we could have sitting and having coffee together, it's still 50% better than nothing. I found myself very depressed in the beginning of this pandemic. Couldn't get off the couch. I just had cats all over me all the time. And, you know, slowly motivating out of that and being able to connect with people has been, I'm just incredibly grateful for it.
Thank you, David. As we are wrapping up this session, I wanted to thank you all. And as a panelist, you have last thoughts you want to share? Maybe if you can share in 1 minute, that would be great. Anything you want to share with the audience as a last note? Gabriela?
Yes, I think that we are facing a huge global monumental issues: social justice, environmental concerns, the burden of racism, mass migration, I mean, huge things. And the only way to listen to this and to build community is to work together. And I think that art has a very, very important role.
Well, what I think is that, I mean, as we can see with the situation, in one way it has benefited organizations because you can have an online festival, more audience members join from all over the world, maybe even for free. It has created that opportunity for many. You can attend a festival as a student also for cheaper without paying for a flight, room on board, and so on. On the other hand, some people don't have access to the internet so easily. People don't have access to a computer that they can just use on their own. So that's a challenge still in some part of the world. I guess that most of the world is still kind of in that situation. We're not all in Boston, Philadelphia, New York, or London. I mean, we're privileged to be here. And on the other hand, Gabriel mentioned, that he's writing now music suited for the screen, the headphones, and the living room or the bedroom, not so much for the concert hall or a venue. So I think that's also a shift that I've been sensing without this in this panel.
Yeah, I could add to that really that I think it's great that there's been so much honesty and kind of openness in our discussion, and I think it's clear that everyone's been really affected by the pandemic and this lockdown situation. And I think the therapeutic powers of music, we're very lucky that we have that in our lives. And I just want to encourage composers to just to keep composing and even just keep sketching, just throw ideas down, just let out your feelings. It doesn't even have to be music that you share, but I think we have to try and keep working, and just and explore the situation, and what we'll be exploring ourselves will certainly be resonate with other people, and will be important to other people. So I think if we just can keep writing, and things will come out of that eventually we will share and will help people around us. So yeah, I just want to encourage people to keep working and try and take this challenge on board. Try writing music for simple pieces for headphones, whatever, basic electronic music, even, we have to keep going.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you guys. And I'd like to ask Gosia to come and join us.
Thank you so much to all of you, our wonderful panelists, and everybody in the audience who have joined today's conversation. It is an honor to have you all here again. On behalf of the Global Leaders Program, the Spanish Association of Symphony Orchestras, Classical Next, Banco de la República, Fundación BBVA, and Fundación Bolívar da Vivienda, I would like to invite you now to stay with us for a special follow-up panel discussion focused on adapting the themes we just discussed to the context of the arts sector in the Ibero-Americas. This Spanish language session, entitled Enfoque Colombia, will begin in 15 minutes from now on. In the meantime, I'd like to take this opportunity to share with you some information about our next global session of Resetting the Stage, which occurs at this same time in 2 weeks, November 19, entitled On the Brink, Public Funding and the Recovery of Cultural Institutions. It will explore the role of governmental institutions and public funding in the different strategies to stabilize and propel the sector in a challenging recovery process after COVID-19. And now we conclude by saying thank you to today's exceptional panel, Gabriela, Gabriel, Frank, David, and Michael. On behalf of all of the public tuning in, we really appreciate you sharing your perspective with us today. And of course, huge thanks to Enrique for your valuable input and help to moderate this fruitful session, as well to Aliena for leading the Q&A. Thanks to all who joined around from the world. Have a good afternoon, good evening, or good rest of the day. Stay safe and healthy. And now we will go into a brief 15-minute pause before returning with our Enfoque Colombia debrief session in Spanish. Thank you so much.